Hello again. Just another model drawing option for the kids. These are all the subtraction methods that we've practiced this year. As I mentioned in the addition video, Mrs. Murphy has pictures of these, the ones that the kids are used to being posted on our bulletin boards and stuff like that in class. They've seen them before, but I thought it might be helpful to you to actually see some of them worked out so that you can kind of get a feel for what we would do. The kids would normally do these 3 or 4 times a week at least on the board and in their head. This is 100% mental for them. The traditional is still where most of them lean at the end of the day, which is totally fine, but we like to give them options for the kids that don't necessarily like that method or just want another way. It's a lot of things that we do in our heads as adults. We're just teaching them to do it on paper. So I'll start you off with traditional, the basic one that we were all taught, where you stack the numbers. So I have 64 minus 27, and then you just proceed to do the work. In this case, I don't have enough to do the first column, so we would have to rename from here. We're taught borrowing, but we call it renaming. I'm going to take a 10 from this one and move that 10 over here, which is why I'm not really adding a 1. I'm adding a 10 to make that 14. So the kids know that this still says 64 because this is really 50 and 14, which is still 64. I didn't change the worth of that number. But now it's just subtracting. 14 minus 7 is 7. And 5 tens minus 2 tens is 3 tens, or 37. Okay, well, that one's pretty self-explanatory. Another one that they like, I have a lot of kids that like this one, is called the open number line, which is basically like a counting up situation, except they can do it however they want, however their number sense makes sense to them, they can go with. So on this number line, I've got to get from 27 to 64. Subtraction is really just finding the space between them. So a kid looking at this might say, well, I mean, they could count up 1, 2, 3, all the way to 64, but that's painful. So they might look at this and be like, well, that'd be a lot easier to count from if I was at 30. So if I go up 3, now I'm at 30. And to go from 30 to 64, some of them might know how to make that whole big jump. Some of them may not. So they may just say, well, a jump of 30 would get me really close. That'd be 60. And that just leaves me another 4 to go. And if I take that 3, 30, and 4 jump that I made, I went 37. I went a distance of 37. So that is my answer. This one also works great. My kids were just learning how to do this with time problems right before we left. Like Sally went to the shop at 1:27 and left at 4:32. How long was she at the shop? Being able to count up minutes that time and finding out how long she was in the shop was the least painful way for a lot of them to do time problems. So we have compensation was another way that they could do it. Kind of like the compensation on addition, but this time for subtraction, we're still going to have it out on a number line. And I'm still going to have 27 to 64. That's still where I'm trying to go. But in this case, it's not super helpful to me to do it like this. Open number line was one thing, but to just look at this and try to do that subtraction problem, it's not great. So I want to adjust these numbers to a problem that is a little bit nicer. And I taught my kids when that happens, the best way to go is to get this number here to either a 5 or a 0, preferably a 0, because we know that when there's a 0 down here, there'll be nothing to worry about renaming and borrowing and all those other pieces. You can just do the problem. So to make this go to a 0 spot, I actually want to add on 3, because that'll bump me to a 30. And instead of trying to find this gap, if I bump this guy up 3, and this guy up 3, I'm now at 30 and 67. That's a lot easier problem to do. I'm going the same distance, I'm covering the same amount of things. I just made the problem look a little bit different because now I can do 67 minus 30 in my head. 37. Done. The other one that we're missing is decompose. The one where we break apart and put back together the problem into a different problem. So for this one, I have 64 and 27. Rather than look at it like this, I'm going to break this number down. I'm going to call this one 20 and 7. And I want to pull something out that's going to work nicely with me with 7 that I can pull out of this number. So I'm actually going to pull out a 14 because I know 14 and 7 is a nice little fact family thing going on there. And that leaves me with 50. So I'm going to do 50 minus 20 and then 14 minus 7 gives me 30 here and 7 here for a combined difference of 37. That method probably is the least likely that they would choose, but it is probably closest to what I would do just trying to do math in my head. That one or this one are probably my two choices for in my head. The kids, most of them like this or maybe one of these two. So I hope that helps you guys. Have a great day.